But right now, I'm going to get up, put my banjo down, and mosey on over to the table back here. And before we go too much further, I think it's very important that we know all of the parts of the banjo, because we will be talking about them freely during the show. And I have got one of my banjos that is stripped down. That is, it hasn't got a head on it, and it's pretty much in pieces, but it'll give you a good idea of what the inside of a fairly good banjo looks like, and we'll talk about some of the parts as we go down them. I'll start out with this. Of course, like I told you, it's going to look a little strange because there's no head, but just pretend that it's put together to start off with, because it hasn't got any strings on it. Now, to start off with, we have the neck of the banjo as opposed to the body or the pot of the banjo. Here's the neck, this is the body. Now, at the top of the neck, we have what is known as the headstock, and this holds the tuning keys. You can see the tuning keys coming through on the front. This is the nut of the banjo, which the strings are brought across at the very top. This acts like the first fret of your banjo, and this is what gives your banjo strings the open sound. It's similar to the bridge at the bottom, of course, which we don't see on this particular banjo, but you've probably noticed that the banjos that are hung on our walls here, they all have bridges on them. Now, glued to the top of the neck is this particular piece of wood. It's usually made out of ebony or rosewood, and it's called the fingerboard. The fingerboard is, of course, the area in which your left hand will be playing, and driven or inlaid into the fingerboard, besides the pearl markers, are the frets. And of course, we'll be putting our fingers behind the frets to hit particular notes and sounds and different techniques that we will be using. On this particular model, you'll notice what is known as a geared fifth banjo peg. I would recommend this very much, although most banjos do not come from the factory with this particular item on them. They're not terribly expensive, and they really add a lot to your banjo as far as making it playable. Keeps your fifth string in tune a lot better, and seeing as how that is the tightest note on your banjo, that's very important. Okay, now to the side here, you'll see that I have a little gadget nailed to the side that's known as a fifth string capo. Of course, in the last series, we discussed capoing up in various positions, and of course, anytime you put a capo on your banjo to play in regular G tuning, you'll have to capo the fifth string up, of course, pretending there's a string on here, to the same amount of frets. In this particular case, if we had a capo on the second fret, we would capo the fifth string up the same amount of frets, 2 frets, which would put it on the 7th fret. Now let's see, going down to the body of the banjo, I think we've pretty well covered the neck. We have about 3 basic parts. We have what is known as the rim, which is, of course, always made of wood. In this case, you can see it's a laminated piece of wood. We have the flange. Of course, the flange is actually what the device that keeps the head tight. You can apply tension to the flange by means of the hooks and the nuts. And the third part is probably the most important, and this is the tone ring. Many of your inexpensive banjos do not have this particular item built in their banjos, and this is what really gives you a good quality banjo sound. Most banjos starting, say, around $500 or so usually have a tone ring in them, although there are several good Japanese imports being made now for around $200 to $400 that do include tone rings. This is very important when you're looking for a banjo. Make sure that it has a tone ring, and a tone ring that is preferably made out of brass or bell brass. I think I got that out. Now, besides the importance of the tone ring, it is important that the flange on your banjo be made out of brass also, and you need to have a pretty thick flange. I think you'll notice this particular model is my Baldwin Ode, one of my more favorite banjos. You'll notice that it has got a very thick flange, about 1/4 inch. So whenever you're buying a banjo, look for a good thick flange, and of course a tone ring, and of course one of the most important things, playability. Here's another part of the banjo that is laying out here that I almost forgot about. This is called the tension hook. Now the tension hook, of course, is what goes over the head to apply the pressure to the head and rests around the tone ring. Tension hook should always be made out of brass.